welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your SpawnCon host, Madeline.
Your what?
SpawnCon.
Oh, SpawnCon. I'm your, as always, I'm your cup noodle helmet Emma. I'm not even host, I just am the helmet.
Emma
I missed that word in there.
The cup noodle helmet. Thanks for tuning into the show. It's my side quest this week, so my turn to choose a games topic for us to discuss. And I've chosen, at no insistence from Emma, product placement in games.
There was no insistence from me.
That's what I'm saying.
Just
Even though
making
it
that clear.
seems like the kind of thing that I would be bullied into choosing by you. It was not. It was just something I came up with spontaneously.
It's not Emma-sponsored content.
You're right. This side quest, chosen by Madeline, brought to you by Emma. So, I'll hand Emma the mic, and listeners, I'll see you next week. Enjoy Cup Noodle Tuss. Bye.
No, Malin, give the intro. Give your intro. Why did you pick this topic? What are we talking about?
So, not to be an Emma here, but I don't have a particularly insightful reason for picking this topic. I'm sorry, sometimes you have insightful reasons for picking topics. That came out a little harsher than I intended it to be. But I think it came from, there's been in the news that Sony is considering running in-game ads apparently in free-to-play games, although when I thought of this podcast, I hadn't read that it was only in free-to-play games, and I assumed it was like you could tattoo an ad on Kratos' head or something like that. So that may have sparked it. I had a few other ideas for the podcast that sort of led me into this. I'm back playing Judgment, so I'm thinking about product placement a little bit in games. So all sorts of little sprinkles of influence led to us talking about this new and lucrative frontier for marketing agencies everywhere. It's not even that new.
Judgment still has Don Quixote, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
Yeah, I think it's Yakuza 7, they stop having it.
Yeah, it
They don't
doesn't
have
play the
Don
song,
Quixote
though.
anymore.
Every time I go in, I start to sing the song, but the game does not, just me.
The partnership slipping already.
That
You
could
can
just be
see
my
it.
PlayStation dying. It could be like, we're gonna run fine, but we can't handle the Don Quixote song.
I assume it is very resource intensive.
I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's what inspired it, and obviously Emma's ongoing love of cup noodles is always there to inspire
I
it.
don't even really like cup noodles. I feel like I should put that out there.
Yikes.
I know. The product placement did not work on me.
So we'll be talking about all things products in games. There's a lot more of this than I really thought that there was.
Yeah.
Which shouldn't be surprising, but was.
It was surprising to me too. Like, even the ones that have like really obvious ones, like Final Fantasy 15 or Death Stranding's Monster Energy. Like, in the articles I was reading, they're like, they also have like these in there. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean there's other product placement in that? Because it's so subtle. Like, they just have it in there. But it's not quite as, like, draw attention to it as, like, the cup noodles or the monster.
Do you think the other companies who did product placement in Final Fantasy 15 were like, we'll pay Nissan, like, money to make their placement so blatant that ours looks tasteful? Like, do you
I
think
don't
the
think
Coleman
so,
Camping
because-
Company was like...
Because the whole point of product placement is you still want people to notice it, right? On some level. Otherwise,
Yeah.
the subliminal messaging isn't getting through if they're just like, King's Quest is a real game. Did you know that? I didn't even think to look that up when I was playing.
did know that when I researched for today. Yes.
Final Fantasy 15, they're always playing King's Quest. I just assumed that was made up. It didn't even occur to me to Google it. But apparently it's a real game.
Is it a game from Square Enix, or is it just
I don't
like-
know. I didn't look that up.
Okay. Because, like, it's one thing if it's like, oh, okay, we're going to make a tie-in. But it's another thing if it's just a random mobile game that paid to be in Final Fantasy 15.
It's called King's Quest. That's too on the nose to, like...
Yeah, you're right. So, I guess let me give the the brief history of product placement in games with some highlights, and then we can talk about some more modern examples and debates and that sort of thing. So this goes back all the way to the 80s or so. But back then, more than just being product placement in games, it was more games made by companies about their product.
I mean, those still exist, but yeah.
That's true. I just mean to say, those were like actual games that people really like looked at as games. And that's not to say that that's not the case now, especially in the mobile space. But like, you wouldn't now, like, Coca-Cola is not making console games anymore. It's not how they're using their marketing dollars. As opposed to when they made Pepsi Invaders, those Space Invaders, but with, you were shooting Pepsi, the letters Pepsi, with your Coke bottle shaped spaceship.
I've definitely... Have we talked about that on the show before? Or have I heard about that in, like, some game design class in college or something?
I can't place why I would have ever talked about Pepsi Invaders before. So I think it has to be outside information for you.
Maybe. It just sounds familiar.
We've talked about the Obama billboards before. That came up in the Games and American Politics episode at July 4th last year. Which also, you know, this is another question for this episode of what's product placement, what's advertising, what's an advergame, what's just a crossover, right? Not that these questions are especially, like, wildly interesting, because in the end, it's sort of all advertisement.
Yeah, you know how I feel about defining words. Not a fan. I think we should just freeform...
I think all words can mean whatever you want them to mean. So there's that. Some, like, it just seems like they're just all of these kind of, like, you look back at them and you're like, this is a horrible branded game. But some of them were well reviewed. Apparently, Chex Quest, which is a 90s sort of Doom reskin, but advertising Chex, was well received. Which, just imagine.
Good to know.
Imagine a cereal company making a game today, people being like, yes, this is good.
A lot of people played that KFC visual novel.
You know, that is true. I'd forgotten about the KFC visual novel. But people didn't think it was good, right?
I don't think so. I don't know, though. Do they have to think it's good, I guess, for it to be effective? No.
You're right. That is true.
It just has to be memorable, and you get large streamers to play it, and then suddenly everybody wants KFC.
Anytime I think of KFC product placement, I just think of the episode of Community where they are in, this is a video game, in fact, where they are in the space shuttle simulator, and you may not have seen this one.
I didn't get to the later season.
This is season 2, so nice try.
But well, then I probably have seen it, but do not remember it.
They're in the space shuttle simulator, and they have to, like, work together to get the 11 Herbs and Spice Galaxy or whatever. They're, like, locked in it.
Oh, yeah.
Abed's doing mission control on the outside.
That vaguely now.
Anyway, I think of that whenever I think of any kind of KFC product placement. I also think of Subway. Community just has really excellent product placement, but this is not a TV podcast. This is a games podcast. So as we move more into the 2000s and 2010s and this millennium, not that those advert games don't still exist, but we see the big stories and the big media energy around product placement instead being in, product placement. So there was a big thing in 2005 when EverQuest 2 added the ability to do a command to go order a real-life pizza through the game, which they evidently wanted to expand into ordering a lot of other things, but I think it only ever was a Pizza Hut deal. But I do really like the news articles about it that are like, they want to add, like, you would, like, pay for your pizzas in your monthly subscription. It's like, that'd be dope. Give me a game subscription that comes with some pizzas every month. That seems good to me. There's also, of course, the infamous Subway sponsorship in Uncharted 3. Which, did you watch the ad?
I did, yeah.
He's really just holding some Subway.
Some really impressive, video editing on him grabbing the soda when he was falling, I thought.
Yeah.
Really powerful. Felt very immersive.
But in that one, you had to go and, you could buy a sandwich and it would give you access to the online early.
That's pretty
version.
wild.
Yeah, I know.
That's a pretty wild tie-in.
I
I know we're adding more and more, if you pre-order it digitally, you get it, a week in advance now. But now you have to Grubhub Subway.
I guess it's probably
To
pre
get
Grubhub. Grubhub the sub. And then, of course, more recently, there's a lot of this, right? Emma talked about Death Stranding and Monster Energy, wherein Monster Energy is a key component of how you stay energized in that game, which we'll talk about more, but I really feel like feels spot on. I think people can complain about the Monster sponsorship all they want. I think it's an artistic choice, and I think it fits with the world of Death Stranding. I've not played Death Stranding, but I'm making this, I'm pronouncing this by fiat.
Sure.
There's also been more recently moving in kind of fashion sponsorships in games. Fortnite obviously will just do anything that anyone will pay them to do, seemingly.
The fashion stuff has been around for a while, I feel like I should stress.
That's fair.
It's not more recently than Death Stranding. I was thinking about it because I'm playing Final Fantasy 13 right now, and I remembered, wasn't Lightning the face of, a fashion line for, a season? And she was. She was, Louis Vuitton. She was the face of, a spring line for Louis Vuitton. And I was like, man, there's a lot of...
That's weird.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of crossover between fashion, high fashion, and video games now, which I think is really interesting in terms of, cross-promotion that, does not make sense to me on the surface, but must make some sense because they keep doing it. So
there weren't any Baby Ruths actually in Final Fantasy VII Remake, were there?
Butterfingers. And no.
Right, okay.
No, that's just they probably paid Butterfingers for that, I would assume.
I don't know. I always wonder, it's who's paying who in some of these deals. Who's getting the benefit.
No, but there was no long monologue in Final Fantasy VII Remake about how Butterfingers will take down the... or whatever.
I feel a little political for Butterfinger to weigh in on that, to be honest. So
Butterfingers will help you stay energized while you blow up factories that are destroying the planet.
That's more or less what Death Stranding does with Monster Energy, minus the blowing up factories part, I think.
Yes, the Death Stranding's not a very revolutionary game. I wouldn't say.
No, I wasn't saying anything about revolution. I was just saying they'll keep you energized while you do your job.
Yeah.
But before I jump into these I don't know, super recent examples, one thing I wanted to talk about first is the games and genres of games that are really built on product placement where you just wouldn't, or if you're me anyway, you wouldn't think about it. What I'm thinking about right now is specifically skateboarding games and racing games. Both
all
of which...
sports games.
That's true. Well, I that's true. I'm interested to talk about FIFA and Madden and what if that is product placement and what if that is these are humans. Are the humans the products?
No, but I specifically mean the advertisements they have on
totally.
The court.
That's so true.
Sports games.
Yeah. But it's interesting to me, you might quibble about the advertisements in sports games, although not that I play much FIFA anymore, any FIFA anymore, but who knows? It's the PS Plus free game. Maybe I'll download it.
Well, no, just it's interesting because a lot of the things I was watching and reading about product placement were sports games can get away with it, right? Because it's recreating what a sports field looks like,
yeah,
which is surrounded by advertisements.
Yeah.
So it makes sense in your brain that there's advertisements there, whereas other product placement can be more or less immersion breaking for people playing it, based on the game.
And I'm thinking
context.
even, like, it's one thing to be like, oh yes, there are advertisements on the side of a soccer field or on the side of a football field or on the billboards or whatever. I feel like it's another thing to be like, oh yeah, I'm psyched. This specific luxury car is in Forza Horizon. So it's interesting to me that across these sports genres, like the product placement, I mean, obviously there can be exceptions to this where it's just bad, but the product placement range is much more from this is pretty neutral to this is something to be actively psyched about, which I think is something that just like does not carry over to any other genre.
What do you mean? Oh, like in racing games, there's like a cool car you can drive.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or
I wasn't quite grasping what you were saying there, but I get it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think maybe that's some crossover with fashion, though, too, right? It's a chance to experience a thing that maybe you're never going to actually be able to buy, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's just interesting to me to look at these, on the one hand, rare. On the other hand, not that rare, because there's tons of fashion product placement and there's tons of car product placement, and skateboarding games are like constant brand stuff, product placement. And most of the time when you think of something being called out as product placement, that has a negative connotation. And so it would be weird, it would almost be weird to talk about the like licensed car designs in Forza being product placement, right? Like, sort of they are. Of course they are. They're kind of an advertisement for the car, but they're also something that's so core to what the game experience is that it would feel weird to put that under the same category as Nathan Drake carrying a Subway sub.
Sure. Yeah, it is one of those things where I kind of wonder who pays who in that scenario.
Right? Who is getting the better advertising end of the bargain here?
I guess it's like why are you licensing it, right? Or why are you using it, right? Like Monster Energy and Death Stranding, Cup Noodle, and Final Fantasy 15. Those are clearly advertisements. They're there to advertise those products. But is the car there in Forza for storytelling purposes?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if you were writing a story and the person works at Starbucks, you know?
Right.
That's not you advertising Starbucks. That's just you being like, this character works at Starbucks. Right?
Yeah.
In which, like, nobody's paying each other for that. Depending.
Right.
On various factors that I don't fully understand.
Yeah.
I was just looking, I wasn't even looking for like video games. I was just like looking for like a real clear answer of how people use it in like books. And even that, like, I couldn't really find anything. It was just kind of like, yeah, you can, but also they can get mad at you. Was sort of the answer.
Which I think more or less sums it up. In games, of course, it's a little bit trickier because it's one thing to use the name Starbucks when you're writing, is another thing to use their trademark branded logo. So, yes. Of course, if you're making a video game, there's...
Yes, the other thing about, like, cars or recreating clothing or cars is, like, they will need to send you all of their stuff so that you can effectively model a 3D recreation of that thing. So it's not just like you're incidentally putting it in there. It's like you're like, hey, please send me your blueprints so that I can faithfully recreate this car for you.
Yeah, I spent a lot of my time researching this, doing a lot of wondering who pays who in so many of these situations. Because, and I think this really just comes from a place of, I don't understand how marketing works. Like, to be honest, all of this seems like a bad idea. But that's also because, I mean, this is not totally true. I'm not making myself out to be some kind of, like, absolute consumer saint here. But I don't like make a lot of like impulse purchases, right? I'm not gonna buy Monster Energy because I've been playing Death Stranding. Like I'm not. And so it's hard for me to be
Well,
like,
okay, but that's not fair. You don't drink energy drinks.
I mean, okay, yeah, I know. And that obviously was not quite fair. But it just seems to me like I don't understand. I know there has to be a connection, but it's hard for me to look at these and be like, yeah, that's definitely effective. What a great use of your money to...
Well, what I saw was really interesting is apparently after Death Stranding came out, there was actually a rise in Monster Energy stocks.
No, everything I read was like, yeah, games advertising is definitely effective. And I was like, that's crazy. I would never think that this would be effective. It sort of makes sense when you think of it. And there's all sorts of reasons why it would be effective, but it's just like something in my brain does not want to click.
I don't know.
It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, why would I buy Gucci because my sim is wearing Gucci?
Well, I mean, do you watch every single ad you see and are suddenly like, oh, I must go buy this? Like, just normal ads?
No, of course
But
not.
they still do that because they still have an effect, right?
I know, but I don't understand those either. That's all I'm saying.
You just don't understand advertising at all?
More or less. That's basically what I'm saying, is that I understand that ads must work. And because people do see ads and do buy things, and so they must work. I just don't understand the magic secret sauce behind them actually working.
Well, it is my understanding that traditional advertisements aren't as effective in modern times, which is why there's more and more companies looking for different avenues for marketing, hence why you might see product placement in video games.
Do you ever think about how bad the ads are in Duolingo? Duolingo is a video game.
It doesn't really occur to me.
Sometimes I just
Pretty much, it's not any worse than a lot of any other free app that I've used.
I guess that's fair. Sometimes I just look at them and I'm like, Duolingo is like a big app, and it's advertising these like garbage little game apps that look terrible.
Well, it's whoever pays Duolingo for the ad space.
I know, but I'm like, it feels like Duolingo's ad space should be more expensive than this like crappy little mobile game can buy.
I did get ads for the Great Ace Attorney.
Did you really?
Duolingo.
See, your ads
Yeah.
must be more strongly targeted. I just get ones that are like, oh, pour the little test tube beaker colors so you get the same color.
I usually get TikTok ads now,
Oh, nice.
so
Because you're in the target. I'm out of the 18 to 25 demographic, so
I guess so.
you're still targeted. Anyway, all I'm saying is I'm dumb. I don't know what marketing is or how it works, but apparently game ads work.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
I mean, even if it's just like, you're someone who does drink that stuff, it's like a reminder that you should go buy some more,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which works in its own way. It doesn't necessarily have to convince new converts to Monster Energy. It just has to be like, oh yeah, I like Monster. I want to stay up playing Death Stranding all night. Maybe I should run to the convenience store and pick up some Monster.
You're selling me on it. Maybe I'll go get a Monster.
I don't drink energy drinks.
Well,
Did I buy Butterfingers before I started playing Final Fantasy VII Remake? Yes.
did you really?
I bought a bag of Butterfingers to have while I played it. Not all at once, I should say,
Did
but
you
over
do
the
that
course of playing it.
just in case your game had like a moment where they were like, you have to eat a Butterfinger now?
Yes. Because then I could post it on our social media for clout.
I wouldn't be shocked if like you don't spoil Integrate for me, but did they have a moment where they were like, okay, put the Butterfinger on the little sensor in the middle and we'll scan if you have a Butterfinger and we'll give you a power up?
Yes.
I knew it.
The specialty food of Wutai. Butterfingers.
I knew that's why it was only on PS5.
The PS4 doesn't have the power to render a Butterfinger.
Well, it doesn't have the power to scan a Butterfinger that you put up against your DualSense 5.
Okay.
You can't read it. All right, tell me why cup noodles are your favorite product placement of all time.
It's very funny. I mean, okay, so it's not great, okay? It's not...
Introduce
it's a little
the
weird.
people what the deal is with this for those who have not played Final Fantasy 15.
Alright, so Final Fantasy 15, you are Noctis, a prince. You're hanging out with your 3 bros, going on a road trip across the country so you can get married, like a month-long bachelor party, I assume is what it is. Some things go wrong, there's a whole plot, etc. Who cares? What really matters is Cup Noodle.
Cup Noodle.
So there's a lot of Cup Noodle in this. There's billboards. There's a lot of Cup Noodle billboards that you drive past because a lot of this game is driving. So they have billboards. I wonder if there's other product placement on the billboards. It's never occurred to me to look at them. But
Only
the Cup
Cup
Noodle
Noodle
ones are just so obvious. And then there is an entire quest line, a side quest line you can get. You get to one of the major cities, and there's a truck selling Cup Noodle. You're saying, this doesn't sound very fantasy-like. And I say, yes, you're right.
Cup noodles are a fantasy. Get out of town.
They do also have cell phones in this one, so it's fine. So you get Cup Noodle from a truck, and one of your bros, Gladio, is like, man, Cup Noodles are so good. They're cheap, they're filling, they've got lots of good stuff in it. And Ignis, another one of your bros, is not very convinced, right? He's like, I bet I could make Cup Noodle with fresh ingredients. And so there's a whole quest where you go and collect ingredients so that Ignis can learn the Cup Noodle recipe. After which you all agree that while this Cup Noodle, this fresh Cup Noodle, is very good, nothing matches up to the taste of true Cup Noodle from the convenience store / Cup Noodle truck.
Incredible.
And also, at some point, they added free DLC where you can put a Cup Noodle helmet on Noctis's head as a cosmetic.
Longtime listeners of the podcast may remember that Emma at one point had plans to make a Cup Noodle Test video series.
I could still do it. I could go back and do it. It's on. I want to replay it this year, so maybe Cup Noodle Test will return.
Don't dangle this in front of me. Don't taunt me with the prospect of Cup Noodle Test when you know you won't deliver.
You never know. You never know. So, it's really in your face about it, which I think is actually conversely what makes it not bother me as much, because it's just so obvious, right?
Yeah, it feels like you either need to be incredibly subtle or you need to just lean into, this is going to be campy.
Yeah, but the thing is, the fact that it's campy and makes it at least feel less insidious, I guess.
Yeah.
In terms of, it's not, seeping into my brain with, subtle inclusions of the Cup Noodle logo everywhere. Yeah. It is just we want you to buy Cup Noodle. Finger guns. That's just so obvious. I don't know. I have no actual psychiatric data on whether that makes it more or less effective, but it makes it feel less effective, yeah. Which makes me feel less bothered by it, if that makes sense.
Yes. You feel like you're smart enough to not fall for this, so that when you buy Cup Noodles, it's because you wanted them all along, not because you were tricked.
Yes. It does. So, when I was in college, I would want to have something, on while I was doing work, so I started watching, Hawaii Five-0, which is a cop show in Hawaii. It's not very deep. But somewhere in the later seasons, they got, a big deal with, Windows phones and, tablets. And, every couple episodes, there would be something where they would, stop and be like, man, I need to look something up. And they're like, why don't you check out your new Windows phone where you can just conveniently Bing things whenever you need to know something. Or, wow, look at its video calling functionality where you can seamlessly switch between calls.
Oh my god.
And it was very, very funny to me.
It's just like, that's the sort of thing that just doesn't happen anymore, it feels like. It feels like we've moved beyond anyone.
I just think we don't watch the shows where they do that, you know?
I know, but
HBO shows don't have to do this. This is Hawaii Five-O's on some network.
You're right. Are Windows phones even still a thing?
I don't think so. I had a Windows phone at this time, I should tell you.
Wow.
I had it prior to seeing the advertising in Hawaii Five-O, which did make it even funnier. But there's something about it just being so blatant that's amusing. Even if there's a voice in the back of my mind saying, this is probably not very good.
It does seem like you can get Square to do anything if you're a neighbor.
Yeah.
This is almost certainly not how this actually happened, but there are enough rumors online that the situation was just Nissan, which is the company that makes Cup Noodle, has an office that's like around the corner from Square Enix's office, and the team really liked Cup Noodles, and so like they made this happen.
Cup Noodle, I believe in Japan, does do a lot more branded cup noodles as well. Like, I know they were, like, around the same time as this, they did, like, a line of Final Fantasy cup noodles. They could go, like, limited edition ones. Sort of like how, like, things will be on cereal boxes here,
Yeah.
I think.
It does seem like, though, that came about just because somebody was, like, walking around the neighborhood and they ran into each other. Also possible, there are also a few places that I saw that they were like, Cup Noodles sent them a box of Cup Noodles to celebrate the game coming out, and the rest is history. That can't be right, but because of the timing.
That can't be right.
But
Most of the Cup Noodle stuff was already in the game when it released. I feel like I should point that out.
I just love the idea of, like, they got, like, a care package of Cup Noodles, and they were like, okay, these have to go in the game now.
That's why it was delayed.
Yeah.
They were all set to release it, and then they were like, nope, we gotta add Cup Noodles.
Anyway, if you want anything from Square Enix, just run into them in the elevator and pitch it. Seems to be the vibe.
So, of course, the downside of this is companies are evil, right?
Yes.
There was some discussion around, like, Monster Energy in particular, when that was included in Death Stranding, of Monster has some rather unsavory rumors about them, and bad situations in their history, and maybe it's bad to promote them in your game that's supposed to be, like, a work of art, right?
Is there any place for, like, that being intentional, though? Theoretically, I mean to say. Like, I guess what I'm saying is Death Stranding is this, like, post-apocalyptic, horrible world. And to be honest, like, yeah, of course Monster Energy is the only thing that freaking survives into this post-apocalyptic world. Like, sure, of course this kind of evil company that makes a kind of terrible energy drink would be the thing that would survive. But, like, is there any place for that kind of, like, intentionally terrible product? You don't really have to trick the company, one, but two, or is that just like, we can't be evil that way?
I think that it's not that you can't do it, but you have to consider the morals of that approach in our current society.
Right.
Right? It'd be one thing if we were living in a utopia now, where everybody got, money
Endless
that they
Monster.
needed.
Yes, you're
and
right.
college was free, and, people were working 4-day weeks and whatever, and that all companies were good. But you went back in the past and was like, oh, here's this evil company Monster. in my post-apocalyptic wasteland, maybe this is the only thing that survives. But since Monster is a currently functioning company, even if your intention is a critique, you're really just going to end up promoting that product.
Right.
Regardless of what you meant to do.
So then, separately from that, more of the mainstream complaints about the Monster Energy were just that it was, like, incredibly blatant and unsubtle, and not in a necessarily so much in the corny Final Fantasy 15 cup noodles way, but just in a, like, this is super blatant product placement. Like, you fill your water at a stream and it somehow turns into Monster Energy. Is the stream made of Monster now?
Maybe.
Is that why this happened?
Nobody's hydrated in this world, apparently.
Apparently. Makes sense why walking is so hard.
No wonder his nails fall off. He really needs to hydrate more.
Yeah. Well, all the water is Monster now, so he doesn't have a choice.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But I am wondering, you know, people complain about that, and obviously in Death Stranding's case, you know, like, it made a lot of money. It's Kojima, I'm sure he had plenty of, like, investment sources. Like, they didn't, like, need the sponsorship money here. But I do wonder, as games get more and more expensive to make, like, one way, potentially, to semi-ethically have more revenue at your disposal to theoretically treat your team better. Not that anyone would do this, but, like, hey, let's live in this hypothetical world. Would be to take these, like, advertising dollars. But gamers hate them. So it does make me wonder if, like, would people prefer product placement, or would they prefer, like, old school television / new school streaming style advertisements, given that games are only getting more expensive to make and people aren't willing to pay more for them, so these things aren't going away?
I mean, you know, I think about this sometimes too, and it's like, it's hard for me to be concerned about, like, games making more money until the actual structure of game companies change so that money is actually going to the workers, right? Like, when I think that games probably need to change to $70, but the way things that are structured right now, that $70, it's not increasing the wages of anyone working on the games, right? It's just it's going to the company. But putting that aside,
Sure.
I do think probably product placement is the easier way to go versus if I was playing Elden Ring and went through, like, a boss chamber and there was, like, a 30-second ad for Taco Bell. And then I went into the boss chamber and died. And then, you know, went back through and there was a 30-second ad for Starbucks.
I hear that, and I think
that's its own form of torture.
I think Elden Ring is a uniquely bad example for this, and you did that on purpose, I'm sure. But, like, what I'm thinking of, something that just occurred to me, and look, this wouldn't work for the advertiser, right? I'm willing to admit that this won't work, and product placement is a more effective way to get people to actually pay attention, because I read this same study cited over and over and over that Gen Z skips past ads as soon as they can, right? So, like, okay, I get that this wouldn't work. However, hear me out, teams. So loading screens are a thing of the past, right? We don't need loading screens anymore. They're dead. But gamers kind of miss loading screens, don't they? Like, I don't know about you, but I miss having a moment to check my texts every once in a while, just to see if anybody texted me. They haven't, but you see if any of the dogs I follow posted a cute pic on Instagram. So bring back loading screens, but with, like, ads. Give the gamers what they want, which is a moment to look at their phones.
I'd be curious to do, like, a survey of, you know, gamers.
Just in
See
general.
how many people miss loading screens. The specific demographic called gamers.
Yeah.
to see how people feel about missing loading screens. Because I don't know if that's just us. I sometimes think that's just us.
I swear that I've read an article about this, so there's at least some games writer somewhere who also misses loading screens.
Okay, the three of us.
You're right. I'm not saying, like, I mean, whatever. Of course, once you open this door, you wouldn't be able to close it, right? I'm not saying go full Twitch and do 15 minutes of ads every 90 minutes or whatever nuts thing they're proposing now, right? I'm just saying, don't we all miss a 30-second moment to check Twitter?
But yeah, as soon as you open that door,
right, then it's full my PlayStation 4's loading times right now.
Yeah.
I still thought it was a good idea, but whatever.
We're going to sell Tomb Raider specifically to finance more 30-second advertisements in our game.
I really think it's the way to go. You too can own. Just tell people that they are owning a piece of the game. Just saying. So, you raised an interesting question that I'll ask to you now. Is Kingdom Hearts product placement? Do you think it is? I responded to this in our notes, but you just asked the question.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because it shouldn't be. But I can't help but think of most of the mainstream things that Disney puts out, you know, like it's Marvel stuff and it's just Disney movies. I've started to think of those more as products. Which isn't, you know, whatever. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy them or get value out of them or whatever. But it does, I think whether Kingdom Hearts is product placement, and I think the argument is more relevant in the newer games, I believe. Especially as it seems like Disney has put a little bit more restriction on them in terms of how they do the Disney worlds, such as please include Let It Go, for instance.
I really don't think that was a Disney fiat. I really think that was Nomura was like, I want to do this. Or at least he's done a good job talking about it that way.
I would be curious.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen it both ways in different interviews.
Yeah.
So, but isn't, like, regardless of whether the movie is included in Kingdom Hearts' product placement, isn't including the song Let It Go product placement?
So here's one thing I'll say, and it shouldn't necessarily be this way, but this is how I feel about Disney properties. Is there anyone on the planet who hasn't already heard Let It Go?
That doesn't mean, that's not how advertising works.
I know it's not, but something that I think, and I don't think that this is the correct way to think of things, but the impulse that I have with Disney/Marvel, those are the same, right? But Disney-Marvel crossover type things, is that because those things have such cultural saturation already, even though it definitely is product placement, it just doesn't feel that way in the same way. Like, those are everywhere already, and so it would be weird to talk about it as, like, it's product placement, especially with, you know, the Disney Vault is, I think, less of a thing now than it was in the first days of Kingdom Hearts, but it would be weird to think of, like, oh, you're advertising this movie that, like, you aren't even actually allowed to buy right now, right? So
that's the Nintendo way.
Exactly. So if it's anything, it's an ad for game. Right?
Yeah, I did, in your take, think, yeah. I mean, especially since I believe legally Kingdom Hearts, the characters of Kingdom Hearts at least, belong to Disney. rather than Square Enix. So if anything, I guess the Final Fantasy characters are product placement.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I just think it's another one of those like weird gray lines around what we consider product placement, which is that the better something is done, the less likely you are to think about it as product placement, and the more likely you are to think it's just like part of the product. And I think Kingdom Hearts falls into that because product placement, this doesn't have to be the case, but I think like usually we would define it as something that feels sort of shoehorned in, sort of, that like intrudes upon the experience. And obviously like that is the experience in Kingdom Hearts. I did see someone on a message board refer to the attractions, like the summoning attraction things in Kingdom Hearts 3 as product placement, which is like, okay, like I guess. I don't know if those really count as like an advertisement for Disney World, but like I guess.
Yeah.
They're pretty bad product placement if they are.
Yeah. Disney World would be like an amusement park would be a weird thing to product place, I feel like. Maybe not. Who knows? But I am thinking like there's I read some article about like how Kingdom Hearts made crossovers cool and doomed us all.
Oh, I read that
which
article
I thought
too. Yeah.
was interesting and made some good points. And I do think there's like this sliding scale a little bit of product placement to the metaverse or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Like if like Fortnite.
Yeah.
Fortnite is all product placement at this point.
Yeah.
It is comprised of product placement, but because it is all product placement, it does no longer feels like product placement. It's slid along that scale to the crossover metaverse virtual space of culture area.
Well, something I think that Fortnite did in a really savvy way was introduce those partnerships with cross promotions that made sense, right? Some of the articles you posted talked about this, that like, you know, them partnering with Marvel, especially, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, before there was quite so much kind of like Marvel backlash, oversaturation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like, oh my gosh, like that doesn't even feel like product placement. It's like, wow, these two giant brands coming together, this is an event, right? Or partnering with like these like soccer things, or like Marshmello was like a Fortnite fan apparently and did the concert, right? I feel like sort of smartly picked who those first partnerships were, so it wasn't just like, hey, we're partnering with Monster Energy. Although Monster Energy probably could have feasibly been on brand for this as well, right? But it wasn't like, hey, we're partnering with Sephora, right? Or something like that, where it's like, oh, that's a little weird. And once they'd gotten everyone used to these product placements being an event, right? That's, I think, what Fortnite has really, like, the real magic trick that they've pulled, right? Is it's like, not only are they just, like, made up of advertisements for other products, but they've, like, turned that into, like, that's news. This, like, advertisement that they're doing with another company, that's a news item. And that's an item you should be excited about. It's
yeah.
like, whoa. That's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
But also it's like, it's weird, even though like Ariana Grande obviously is a product, right? It's weird to be like, she's a product.
Yeah. Well, you know, you think about it more like, of course, she herself isn't a product. She's a human being. But the area, to whatever extent celebrities are human beings, I guess. But the Ariana Grande brand is a product.
Right.
So I tend to think of it more as like they're partnering with the brand of whatever they're working with, not like the person. It's their image.
Right.
And that's the product that they're using and advertising in their game.
So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about, we talked about Kingdom Hearts, so I've got to talk about Yakuza too.
Sure.
Because it's partially what inspired this episode, is that the Yakuza series are a rare example of what I think is almost universally praised incorporation of product placement. And not in the way that Fortnite does it, where it's like, big news that Fortnite is partnering with Wendy's or something like that. But instead where people like celebrate it and feel like it's a part of the game. And it was really interesting to me to think about, like, I fall into that camp. I definitely find the product placement in Yakuza really charming, right? Whenever I see the Sushi Zanmai stuff, I'm reminded of the Sushi Zanmai that we stayed above. Like, that's where we stayed. We stayed right in front of the Millennium Tower, apparently, in Japan, because that's where the Sushi Zanmai is.
There's more than one Sushi Zanmai.
I know. I'm just kidding. But, like, when we stayed in Kabuchiko, right? Like, we stand by the Sushi Zanmai, and so whenever I see it, I'm like, Sushi Zanmai! And, like, the Don Quixote, I'm like, I've been to a Don Quixote, right?
Well, see, I think that's why that's important to Yakuza and why they get away with it is because the part of what's essential to Yakuza is how sort of faithfully, if, shrunken, they recreate that part of the city that it's based on. Kamurocho is Kabukicho. Which one? Sotenbori is the one in Yakuza, right? Is Dotonbori. Mm-hmm. They just call Yokohama Yokohama.
Yeah, all the ones in he's just in Sapporo. Like, but those
I don't know
two.
if the Yakuza 7's in Ijincho, which I don't know if that's
I think
that's probably a neighborhood that's made up.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, obviously Tokyo is still Tokyo, so
yes,
I guess similar.
That makes sense. But they faithfully recreate those parts of the city, and those parts of the city have like recognizable landmarks that are brands. So it makes sense that some of the bigger things they might want to include faithfully in their game, if possible.
It was just interesting for me to think. I feel very positively about this because, I have my touristy dreams of going back to Japan, but I sort of like wonder what I feel as positively about a game that was as saturated with Western brands. Like if I was going to Burger King and popping into CVS to buy my energy pills and like eating Chipotle, right? Like going to Applebee's. Like what I feel as positively about that, or like Yakuza 5, you do a side quest where you're with the Sushi Zanmai guy, and you do a side quest where you're with, I can't remember, like another one of the like chain restaurant owners. And it's like, would I feel cool about doing a side quest with Ronald McDonald? Like, probably not. That would be weird. But I was super hyped to go fishing with the Sushi Zanmai guy.
Man, I should have checked. I don't feel like GTA has very much real stuff in it.
Well, I was thinking too, and again, I didn't check into this, but I wonder if the Spider-Man games, like, this is the closest thing that I could think of to a Western version of that is the Spider-Man.
The difference with the Spider-Man games, though, is you're not really walking around that city.
Yeah.
You're not, like, down on the ground very much. Like, going in to places in your Spider-Man suit.
But that's what I think is like the closest analog to that. And it's not even a very close analog, right? Of, oh, okay, it's kind of exciting to be zipping around something in a recognizable New York.
Yeah.
But
I just mean, like, not that, I don't really believe that Yakuza is like the Japanese GTA, but those are set in cities that are real.
Yeah. Right?
I just don't think that they have a lot of, like, I think they have fake restaurants and stuff.
With Yakuza, this is also a situation where I'm really curious about who is paying who. Because I watched an interview with the creator and former studio head, and it just seems like they are really aggressive about courting brands because this was something that was really important to him. Which, of course, I've seen plenty of stuff written too that's like, for the first game, they really needed the money. But, you know, even if that was
well, in that case, they paid them for the first game if they're doing it because they need the money. You do have to court sponsors.
Right.
As well.
I guess I'm just wondering, like, he said in Yakuza 5 they had 150 different brand partnerships. It's like, that's an outrageous amount of money if all of those people were paying you. But maybe that's how they finance it. I don't know. Maybe that's where all my side quest content comes from.
I don't know.
And, like, all sorts of stuff that I didn't even... Like, did you know that the karaoke system is branded? Is, like, a certain style of karaoke?
That makes sense.
I know, but, like, would I have ever thought of that? Absolutely not.
No.
And I don't know the difference between the made-up restaurants and the ones that are real.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was really interesting to hear that, you know, you don't normally think of product placement as something that you're, like, excited to include in your game beyond the, you know, obviously boilerplate press release kind of language of, like, we're thrilled to partner with Rite Aid. But it was interesting there to be like, no, like, this guy is freaking psyched to have Boss Coffee doing this. Well, what product do you wish would be in a game?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I got nothing. I'm not very brand motivated.
I would just have a lot of brand loyalty.
Yeah.
Just all cup noodles.
Yeah.
Bet you anything Sora eats cup noodles in Kingdom Hearts 4.
Hope so.
Bet you anything. Well, any final thoughts?
Brought to you by Zoom microphones.
Wouldn't that have been funny if we were like, joke's on you, listeners. Like, the reason we're doing a product placement episode is because we have an ad deal and we thought it would be funny.
No, we do not. It is not brought to you by Zoom microphones.
I mean, it sort of is. The Zoom microphones are bringing us to you.
Yes, physically.
Yeah.
They're doing so.
But not with financial support. Well, listeners, do you have a favorite or least favorite example of product placement in games? Did you play... I was about to call it Chex Killers, but that's not what it was called. Chex Quest, or
Chex Killers.
Pepsi Invaders, or did you ever order a pizza through EverQuest 2? Did playing Death Stranding make you order a bunch of cases of Monster Energy to be delivered to your house because you were playing it at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic and you weren't going to the store, so you had a courier bring you huge cartons of Monster Energy, carrying it on their back through a post-apocalyptic world? You probably did. But if you have any thoughts on any of those things, or this episode, or the podcast in general, hit us up on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat, and read our blog featuring long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend and Split Screen. But most importantly, if you enjoy the show, you should subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you're listening to this podcast today, and pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find Talk This. Next week, it's been so long since we picked these games that I don't remember what they are.
Professor Layton.
Professor Layton.
And Returnal.
I confuse Professor Layton with Detective Conan.
Same thing.
Is it?
I assume. No.
Is it not the same thing?
It's really not.
I get the two of them mixed up in my head, and I don't really know very much about either of them.
I think Detective Conan, the child, is actually like a teenager who's been like cursed into child form.
Is Professor Layton not a child?
So Professor Layton has a child with him named Luke.
Oh,
In the
okay.
first few, at least.
I was scared. I was like, "There's no kids." Like, oh no, I'm much more
Professor Layton
confused.
himself is not a child, so far as I'm aware.
Phew. Okay. Well, listeners, look forward to next week where I will know things about Professor Layton and I will know things about Returnal other than you can't save. Only I think you can save now.
You can save now.
So look forward to that. But for now, Emma, do you have a good sign off?
Remember to buy Butterfingers.